morning, everyone. Thank you for coming early in the morning with your coffees, and I hope you're enjoying the session. I'm Buse Kaçar from Turkey, Istanbul, and I've been practicing as in-house counsel for the last 15 years. And before that, I was in private practice for 3 years. So unless the other lawyers, normally they be in-house counsel for many years, and then they switch to private practice, but I do always the other way. Today I will go with for ADR, forced compromise, or suggested resolution as well. My agenda is first dispute resolution process, because we should get all the process in total as a whole. Dispute resolution starts from the negotiation of the contract and ends with a nice amicable settlement, according to me. And why do we need alternative dispute resolution methods, and how to choose an arbitration center in the whole world? As my colleague has recently said, there are many arbitration centers, and how to choose the best arbitration center for ourselves. And Astark, Istanbul Arbitration Center, which is a new player in the world, so we can add your presentation as a new arbitration center as well. And I think the most important thing is execution of the arbitration awards or dispute resolution awards. You can win a battle, but if you cannot execute it at the end, then it's nonetheless to win it at the end. And I have some notes to the self. So when we negotiate the contract, everybody interprets it in its own way. I have one interpretation, the other party has another interpretation, and transaction lawyer has another interpretation, and arbitrator or judge has another interpretation. That's why we have all the disputes among the parties, because everybody has its own interpretation way. I mean, the most important thing is, of course, the judge or the arbitrator's interpretation. But at the end, that's how we face, or why we face disputes among the parties. And once we had that interpretation difference, we start negotiating, or we start exchanging notifications among the parties. And this is the place where we start our dispute resolution. Yesterday, one of our colleagues in one of the panels said that in-house lawyers should contact their external counsels as soon as possible once they have any dispute, because it's a whole process, and if you want to win at the end, you have to include external lawyer as soon as possible. And generally, the mistake that we make while we are negotiating or conciliating, everybody tries to win his own way. We generally say my way or highway. But at the end, when you say my way or highway, either party loses its case. So as the lawyers, or as in-house counsel myself, what I try to do is all the time is trying to find an amicable solution for both parties, not only for my company. That's how I think that I can win the case at the end. And so we should go with our way positioning with any dispute. But of course, I mean, if we cannot get that our way position because of egos, sometimes this is also what we face. I think most of the disputes also arise from not because of lack of legal positioning or lack of doing obligations, but also because of egos as well. So in order to manage that, we should go with our way positioning. But if we cannot get any our way agreement, then we should really get ready for that battle. And it's a nice game for me. I take it as a game. And if you want to win any game, you have to practice a lot. You have to practice with the whole team. You have to practice with your practitioner, with your coach. So you have to include all the teams, your external counsel, your whole team in the company, all the engineers, and CEO, CFO, and all possible parties in order to get ready for the battle. And throughout the process, first we generally try negotiation. And if we cannot manage to get any amicable solution at the end, then we go to conciliation. In Turkey, we don't have conciliation as legislative system, by the way, but we can try mediation, which is also legislated very newly, very recently in Turkey, or arbitration. But why do we have ADR system? Why don't we trust our courts? I don't know whether it's the same with all jurisdictions, but in Turkey it's really, really slow. It was slow. It was really slow. I mean, I remember some files of my father. My father is a lawyer as well. When I get into the law school, he got a really important and big file, and I said, "Oh, father, maybe I can, when I finish law school, I can join you as a lawyer as well." And he said, "I will be finished by that time." But guess what? When I completed my LLM degree, he was still continuing that case. So it was quite slow in Turkey. But unfortunately, what we had in 2016, the first coup attempt in July 2016, even much more slower the process. Currently, we don't have judges in place, and we don't have experienced judges in place. I don't know whether it's the same problem with other jurisdictions, but having an experienced judge on a certain point is quite important. We have commercial courts, of course, but a commercial judge can judge on a dispute related with engines, a dispute related with real estate, a dispute related with very delicate matters on financing, banking. It's not possible to get experience on all these subjects, and thinking that they're taking care about thousands of files, you cannot wait a judge really to elaborate your case very delicately. And if we're talking about millions of dollars, then you really want your case to be taken care about delicately. So first, to accelerate the process, of course, when I didn't have any arbitration experience, I thought that, yeah, it's too fast. I mean, we can handle the process in 3-4 months. It's not like that. It takes 2 years at least. But at the end of 2 years, you make sure that you really get a concrete decision, an arbitration award at the end. And confidentiality is another important subject for me. I'm general counsel of Average Group, so we are a private equity fund, and we have really delicate and important shareholder issues. And if you have really delicate shareholder issues and talking about millions and also reputation, you don't want your case to be reviewed by other lawyers if they don't have any right. But in Turkey, if you're a lawyer, you can just go and get a case and you can have a look at it. You cannot get copy, but you can review it and you can read it. So if I want my confidentiality 100%, I want to make sure that my file has not been touched by any other lawyer or any other person apart from who has right on it. And of course, flexibility, doing whatever you want, wherever you want, with whom you want, the experienced people. It's important to capture, to get that And independent arbitrators and independent mediators also, I can add to that as well, is quite important, because I really want to make sure that my arbitrator is, or my mediator is neutral, and he's not representing and he didn't get any influence by any other party. And of course, the most important thing is getting effective and binding awards all around the world. I will mention that later, but it's really tough to have, it's not easy to have a binding and effective award, even if you're doing arbitration. So which arbitration center to choose? There are many, and we are mostly deciding it at the contracts, whether to go with ICC arbitration or AAA arbitration, for example, or LCIA. So I think it should be discussed before starting the negotiation of the contract with the governing law. What I've seen in many negotiations with different jurisdiction parties, they tend to start from the beginning or from the term sheet of the contracts, and mostly they don't have governing law in the term sheet. But when we come to the end of the contract, we start discussing, okay, which law is the governing law, for example, and it's totally meaningless when you already complete the whole negotiations. But this was seen, I've experienced this before, and with the governing law, the arbitration center also should be discussed at the beginning of negotiations. And whilst choosing the arbitration center, also you shouldn't only look at the arbitration center itself, where it's located, or where it's rules, governing rules of the arbitration center, but also the board of arbitration center as well. Because when you cannot agree with the parties whom to choose, it will be the board who will assign the necessary arbitrator for you. So you have to take care about our board of arbitrators and flexibility of the center as well. And user friendliness is another point for choosing the arbitration center, because nowadays you can do everything online. And I mean, and you want to do it online, by the way. You want to just gain time for everything. So user friendliness, and also, of course, last but not least, the secretary of the arbitration center is quite important. For me, my personal assistant is my everything, because she handles everything for me. And what is personal assistant to me is also the secretary of the arbitration center to arbitration center, because they are handling the whole process, and you are dealing every detail with them, and they are helping with the process. And if they are not really handful and also helpful, you cannot continue the process very well. And of course, the most important thing for choosing arbitration center is the cost. I mean, it varies a lot from arbitration center to arbitration center. I will just look at Europe at this moment. I have a comparison. And if we think that a claim amount is 10 million, then the costs of arbitration will be 340,000 in Turkey, in Astark. And in ICC, it's double, 766. And in Swiss Chambers of International Arbitration, it's 896. And in London, with the help of the pound, we have 4.8 million just for the costs for a dispute of 10 million claim amount. So looking at the result is quite important for us because, I mean, as an in-house counsel, I'm responsible for managing the costs. My boss, my CEO, at the end of the year asks, "Hey, what have you done with that money?" And even if you then don't get the decision, the award you want, it will be really tough to explain that how you spent the dollars to the arbitration center. And I would like to talk a little bit about İSTAK, Istanbul Arbitration Center. Since I have 15 minutes here, I think I'm also allowed to make some advertisement about Istanbul Arbitration Center. It is really user-friendly. And by the way, I changed the authorized courts of in all our contracts as the İSTAK Arbitration Center for all internal disputes as well, because it's fast, because up to certain amount, up to 300,000 Turkish liras, I can handle it with emergency arbitration, meaning that I can finish it in 3 months really. And online filing is possible. And of course, freedom of parties and enforceability is quite important. It's enforceable in all countries since it's followed by ancestral law module. And fast track arbitration, as I said, you can get an award in 3 months. So I highly suggest all legal counsels here and all colleagues to choose Istanbul Arbitration Center if it is a dispute between Europe or Middle East or Far East dispute. Because they generally, people tend to choose their own jurisdiction. If they're from Europe, they tend to choose somewhere from Europe, and counsels from the eastern countries tend to choose their party, but in the middle you can also have, there's an arbitration center and that you can rely on very well. So I have some notes to self. This is, these all notes are based on my experience. Arbitration clause, they generally, I mean, when we're negotiating clauses, all counterparties, they try to make it as complicated as possible. But whenever it gets complicated, there's always a problem pops up. So my keyword for myself is keep it as simple as possible. So just, I have the limited and the sample clause of the center, which allows me to use the rules of the arbitration center and makes a valid arbitration clause. Because I've seen a clause, it was signed, an agreement signed just before I was in the company, and I saw that the arbitration clause wasn't valid, and they tried to complicate it with many sentences, and at the end we ended up with an invalid arbitration clause, and we ended up with a delicate matter at the courts. And appointment of arbitrator, this also applies appointment of an external counsel as well. We generally, as in-house counsels, tend to work with the same people, with the same counsels. I tried not to work with an external counsel if there's a dispute. I try not to choose the transactional lawyer for the dispute resolution lawyer, because if a lawyer made a mistake, and we're all people and we have some interpretation in mind, I try to choose an external counsel different than the transactional lawyer, so he can look from different perspectives to solve the problem, to solve the dispute. And I tried to choose a person who is not so busy at those days. I'm really looking for the availability because I want my matter to be handled delicately, personally, and I want his 100% commitment at that time. And also the expertise areas of the arbitrators are important. So you have to have really had a close look at the expertise of the arbitrator. Whether, I mean, he can be really good at real estate law or construction law, but he cannot be good at IP law, for example. And preparation, it's the most important part, I think, for a successful dispute resolution process. You have to get ready. You have to train very well. I mean, if you want to win at the end, you have to really train good. It takes some pain, I know, but the result is good. And all games are won with the team. So work as a team, work with the whole company, involve everybody in from your company, and involve your external counsel as soon as possible. Looking at the execution of arbitration awards, these are the countries ratified the New York Convention. I mean, if you get an award, an arbitration award, you just wanna, if you wanna reach to the end, you have to get it executed in the relevant country. And this map has been, it wasn't involved, it didn't get the involvement of most countries before 2011, but after 2011, almost 136 countries are ratified for New York Convention. So except the countries in gray, you can get your execution of arbitration award in these countries. So before getting an arbitration clause in your agreement, so you have to first look at whether that country involves ratified New York Convention or not. So because at the end you cannot get execution of the reward in that respective country. Even if that country is ratified to New York Convention, there's an Article 5 which allows the counterparty to ask for the annulment of the arbitration award. So you have to have a look at the possible objections, and you have to get necessary precautions during arbitration in order not to have an objected reward at the end. These are lack of party capacity, proper notice, and not allowing the party to represent itself during the arbitration and not giving adequate time to get ready, and arbitrability, and also award contrary to public policy. And one of my friends had a problem with Saudi Arabia. They had an arbitration with a company from Saudi Arabia, but if you want to execute an award in Saudi Arabia, it shouldn't be contrary to Sharia law. So, but during arbitration, they didn't get any Sharia law expert involved in the arbitration, and after long discussions and paying huge amounts of money, they couldn't get that award executed in Saudi Arabia, and they ended up with paying huge amounts of money and not getting it executed. And also, as far as I know, please correct me if I'm wrong, in Italy, you have to have a written arbitration award, written, sealed, and also signed. So meaning that if you have an online arbitration award, you cannot get it registered or you cannot execute it before the course. You have to have the sealed originally and also signed.
You need to have it, let's say, ratified in writing. So
yeah.
it's trying to changing, but that's a procedure.
Yeah, but also one of my friends had that problem. They were trying to do it as soon as possible. They were pushing a lot, but when they went to the court, they saw that, okay, that's an online and it's invalid, and you have to get sealed and original copy, and it was tough for them. And these are the experiences that I have currently. I hope it was useful for you. Thank you.
Thank you. Very interesting and very useful.